All right, well, it does look like we've come full circle here. Congratulations are in order to the Michigan Wolverines on their national championship that happened last night. They completely controlled Washington. They controlled Alabama for much of the game in the semifinal, and they easily won 34 to 13, scoring late there. Michael Penix, what did he have? 51 pass attempts, just 245 yards. It was smothering defense, very impressive. And wow, Michigan finally breaks through. But we do have to discuss the elephant in the room that wasn't talked about last night. The idea of Michigan possibly facing sanctions. Will their national championship get vacated? Will the NCAA come down hard on them when it comes to the cheating scandal? And what is the situation right now for Jim Harbaugh? Very, very intricate situation considering what happened last year. It seemed like he was facing a 4-game suspension. The NCAA tabled it, said, we'll do it next year. But because of Michigan's hard non-conference schedule this upcoming season and week 1, we know they had a bad non-conference this past year. Michigan said, no, we're going to self-impose a 3-game suspension to try and limit the suspension in 2024, which would be this upcoming year. And they self-imposed a 3-game suspension. It was the 3 non-conference games, and they're thinking maybe Harbaugh gets a 1 or a 2-game suspension this year. This was all before the cheating scandal. So then the cheating scandal comes out, Connor Stalions gets fired, Harbaugh gets suspended 3 games late into the season by the Big Ten, and now here we are, completely unknown. We still have the Connor Stalions situation to try and figure out what was he doing on the sideline there, possibly scouting Michigan State. Central Michigan sideline. They asked Central Michigan. Central Michigan doesn't know. It seems like Central Michigan is in bed with Michigan. Harbaugh, knowing some coaches there. All of this is going to have to be sorted out, but right now it seems like the narrative surrounding the cheating outside of, programs like Ohio State and teams that really hate Michigan, there's really not a narrative for it right now considering it's been tabled. There's been no evidence recently. I'm guessing that's all going to pick back up considering there are no more games now. We're going into the offseason. People are going to want clicks, and we should get possibly more evidence on Michigan. Certainly, we would expect at least the Connor Stalions thing to get solved. Was the dude seriously wearing some type of spyware, spy glasses on the sideline of a game Michigan wasn't even involved in? I would say absolutely. And it's interesting that Central Michigan couldn't identify that person and still hasn't identified that person, but people ask me, will this title be vacated? Will Michigan vacate a lot of their wins? Guys, it's impossible to know. This is a 1 in 1,000 type situation that's never happened before. We don't know how the NCAA is going to treat this. The Big Ten did what they thought they could do. I mean, there were a lot of Ohio State fans that thought Michigan should be banned from the Big Ten championship, banned from the playoff. Neither of those things happened. And then if you're a Michigan fan, of course, you're going to argue now the most obvious thing ever. You suspended our head coach. You fired the one guy that was supposedly cheating. We won fair and square still. We beat Ohio State. We beat Alabama. We beat Washington. We went 15-0. So you can't say that we didn't deserve to win the national title. But that's really not how something like this would work. It doesn't really matter that Michigan, without the cheating, would have been good enough to win the national title anyways. The fact that it was happening and has been happening very likely the past 3 years, that's the issue. Whether Michigan is good enough or not doesn't really matter when it comes to cheating. Cheating is its own separate thing. So Michigan can be very good, but if they're cheating, you're still going to get punished. Just because you're really good, it doesn't absolve you from crimes that you commit, if that makes sense. And I'm not saying that Michigan is going to get, games vacated. I don't know what's going to happen. It's impossible to say. A lot of this is based on public perception, public narrative on what happens to Michigan and what happens to Harbaugh. And, Harbaugh last night after the national title when they won, he was asked questions. And he was referencing spring practices, pushing him back. People saying, well, now maybe he's staying because there was the idea, like the Chargers, the Falcons, would have been teams that would be interested in Jim Harbaugh. I'm not going to predict on if he's going to go to the NFL because that's basically impossible to do. I mean, this is a guy 2 years ago took a meeting with the Minnesota Vikings on National Signing Day and still stayed at Michigan. Last year, he was flirting with the Broncos. Everyone thought he was going to leave. This year, the reason it seems more likely is because of the cheating scandal and because he's very likely going to be suspended multiple games in 2024. Now, the whole thing could work out really good for Michigan or really bad. You could get a situation where the NCAA says, no, it's nothing's bad. Harbaugh's only going to be suspended 2 or 3 games. Michigan returns J.J. McCarthy. They return possibly Donovan Edwards, and they go on to 2024. Or you could get a situation where Harbaugh knows it's going to be bad. He knows he's going to be suspended at least 4 games just based off of last year, possibly even more based on the cheating scandal. He says, I'm leaving. Every draft eligible player on Michigan also leaves because they know they're going to get hit by the NCAA. The NCAA hits Michigan really hard, and Michigan is left with a roster that they really have to pick up the pieces to, probably with Sharon Moore crying as an interim head coach. So, I mean, that's the situation surrounding Michigan right now. It is very complicated. There are a lot of things that can happen. Will J.J. McCarthy leave? Will Jim Harbaugh leave? Will this national championship count? Certainly, Michigan fans are going to count it no matter what the NCAA says, and that's fine. But when it comes to record books, I mean, let's understand something. When you talk about vacated wins, Ohio State had all of their wins vacated back in 2010, and the record reflects that. Now, maybe the Buckeyes could try and get those back, but just in general, vacated wins in terms of the record books, and as you go further and further away from it, they do matter because people reference overall records, and obviously when they're referencing overall records, they're not going to include the vacated wins because they were vacated. So vacated wins are a big deal. I don't know if it's going to happen to Michigan. Certainly Michigan, they beat Alabama. They're a hard-nosed team. They're really good on defense. They're really good in the trenches. They are kind of one-dimensional. They really can't throw, but who really cares if you win the national title? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you win the national title, and Michigan did do that. Also, there was a lot of dialogue on my live stream last night. Pretty much everyone agrees. You know, I don't know if Georgia's the best team in college football, but Georgia's like a top 2 or 3 team in college football, and obviously that's why the 4-team playoff is completely, imperfect. That's why we need to expand it, and it will be expanding. And then how about this? It seemed like right as Michigan was winning the national title in the fourth quarter or whenever it was when they finally clinched it after that interception, we got news on Quinshon Judkins, the running back from Ole Miss, who is transferring to Ohio State. It was almost like they timed it. They knew he was coming. They said, listen, wait, hold on. If Michigan wins the title, we're going to do it tonight and try and, I don't think it takes the spotlight away from Michigan or anything like that, but the timing was ridiculous. Like, why would it happen right in the fourth quarter of Michigan winning the national title? The top running back in the portal who nobody thought was going to enter the portal. This is such a strange situation. You've got an Ole Miss team who is going all in for 2024, returning Jackson Dart, and now they're losing their superstar running back who was, 2-time All-SEC. This kid is impressive, and the question is, you would expect Trevion Henderson to go to the draft now, and maybe it to be Judkins and Dolan Hayden to be the lead backs for Ohio State, but there's been rumors that maybe Trevion Henderson returns to Ohio State. Dolan Hayden, who I think is a really good running back, would undoubtedly transfer if that happened, but could you imagine that? That would be a crazy 1-2 punch. They've already got Will Howard, who I think is underrated, and the Buckeyes trying to counter it a little bit with a superstar running back, the best running back in the transfer portal that nobody thought was going to enter. And now there seems to be a big emphasis for Ohio State to really kick it into gear. I mean, Michigan just won the national title, so we'll see what their response will be next year. And there's another thing we were talking about when it comes to Ryan Day. Ryan Day's life might have just gotten a lot easier. Considering we're expanding to the 12-team playoff, you can lose to Michigan, you're still going to be in. Considering Jim Harbaugh might be leaving Michigan, both of those factors might help Ryan Day out immensely, although we will see nothing is confirmed. And then we do have, this is a crazy statistic, you can see Michigan had 5 offensive turnovers all season, 45 penalties all season. Yeah, if you want to talk about a play in that game that really turned it, I want to say the score was 20-13. Penix just completed this long pass to Odunze down the sideline, and they really just called a completely phantom hold on Washington, and that made it like 3rd and 20. I don't know if you guys remember that, but I'm not saying the refs decided this game. Michigan's defense won this game for sure, but it was a really bad penalty. But this is crazy. 4 of 5 of Michigan's offensive turnovers were caused by Bowling Green. And obviously Michigan runs the ball a lot. We get it, but it is a crazy statistic to look at. Either way, Michigan does win the national title here. It technically it's a 2023 season, but it is 2024. Either way, Michigan wins in 2023, and we will see what happens in terms of punishments. My best educated guess is about a 7 or 8 game suspension for Harbaugh. Will they vacate any Michigan wins? I can't. I mean, the problem is if you're going to vacate wins, you kind of have to vacate all of them, don't you? You can't pick and choose and say, oh, we're just going to vacate them in 2022 or we're just going to vacate them in 2023. If the punishment for cheating is vacating wins, all of the wins with Stallions have to be vacated, at least when he started doing it, which a lot of people think was around 2021 when it really kicked up after Michigan had that 2-4 pandemic 2020 season. So we will see what happens. There's a lot up in the air, but guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.